Hello there, and welcome to the Thank You Fellows podcast. My name is Caleb, and today I'm joined once again by doctors Scott Keith and Adam Francisco. We've been working our way through some apologetic questions. We did 2 episodes of introductory material, as well as sort of highlighting what matters in apologetic conversations, what the heart of apologetic conversations are, some of the key objections that people are likely to face, even trying to identify where those objections are going to come from, like the people in your life where you're going to meet that. It's been a fun series to do, to like jump back into and do it in definitely a different way than we did the apologetics series before. You can go back and listen to it. It's 3 years old now. Thank You Fellows did, what day is it? It's the 6th of February. So 2 days ago we turned 4.
Really?
Ooh.
So that's cool.
We should have had a party.
Yeah. Where's
We should do it for 5.
She's like the party queen.
Oh, we did have a party 2 days ago.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. We just didn't know what we were celebrating.
Oh my gosh.
wasn't really
we
a
should do 5 though, because
We were in the back smoking cigars and drinking scotch.
That works.
The other podcasts that have turned this exact age, 40 minutes in the Old Testament, 30 minutes in the New Testament, shortly behind it. So a lot of the podcasts on the network started around this same time. So we're hitting some cool milestones, and it's been great. In 2019, we saw 110% listener growth from the year before in 2018. That wasn't as dramatic this last year too, but we crossed over the 40,000 download mark in 2019, and we're continuing that trend.
Per month, right?
Yeah, per month. I mean, that wavers, but
That's pretty huge.
We broke that.
That's awesome.
Which is really cool. We have some really big months, and then we have some slower months. Like February is always smaller. There's less days generally.
Because we don't have a Valentine's Day episode
or stuff like that.
We should.
No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if you want to.
Not really.
I'll release the unhappiness episode.
You'd probably have to spring for some serious scotch
Yeah.
to get us talk. Rod, could you imagine Rod talking about Valentine's
with
Day?
roses and chocolates and.
Oh, geez. Okay, I'm out.
But I want to thank listeners for helping us get here. We also have some things that I'm just super proud of. If you search C.S. Lewis in iTunes, for instance, in the podcasting app, Thank You Fellows is the first thing that pops up. That's awesome when there's like C.S. Lewis Preservation Society things on there, and we are.
That's like mic drop worthy.
That's pretty great. Actually, I think that gives me ideas to do other things. There's even things like, I think if you type Augustine, we're like number 6 or something like that, even though there's, like whole, these groups of Augustinian scholars who have
Dudes who have
podcasts.
been studying him their whole life.
Yeah,
right?
so-
we spend 15 minutes. Just kidding.
I read a book once.
Yeah, so, that's been some cool, we have some cool milestones, and that's a big thank you. Again, a big thank you to everybody who's been helping by writing reviews of the show. There's some really positive ones in there. I saw, I mentioned a funny negative, or like it was a 3-star one, so it wasn't fully negative, from like a couple months ago about that apparently we don't like evangelicals.
That's funny because I was just on there. I saw one that said, "Evangelicals must listen to this podcast."
Yeah. So I wonder if
We don't like evangelicals?
there must have been an episode where we were feeling real
It's probably my fault.
real angsty about it.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, it's probably true.
So, I said this a couple weeks ago too. If for some reason you feel like you do have, you're disgruntled and you've kept listening,
Thank you.
I guess thank you. But also you can send me an email. So I'll see those and we can see what's up too. So I'd be interested, but nevertheless, let's move on to this episode here. So I've got some more listener questions. I actually have 2 that are pretty related. So I'm going to read them both. I'll give the simple one first and then the more expanded version. And these came from 2 different people. So yet they were pretty similar. So and we'll be able to break them down. So the one is, all right, how do I defend the claim that the outsider needs a savior? It's my understanding that that used to be a given, that somebody felt some sort of guilt or might even be able to admit that they were a sinner. But now it seems like we're at a ground zero where nobody thinks they've done anything wrong. Okay.
I disagree with that.
Okay. So we'll have that. And then let me pull up the more, what I think is related, but not quite exactly the same. So I understand why it's important, this is the question, to investigate the truthfulness of religion generally. If any religion were true, it would then have some implications, maybe major ones. And it would be foolish to totally ignore the religious question and suffer the consequences simply because I don't want to look into it, sort of a Pascal's wager sort of thing going on there, I guess. However, I don't want to / look into every theory or claim that pops into my life. No one does. We don't have time for that, or functionally can't even do that. We make initial decisions about things and their likelihood of the truthfulness of any claim and determine whether it should be looked into at all. And this basically, he gives some examples of some ludicrous things, like somebody might tell him that they went to dinner with Elvis recently, and he's not going to even bother investigating.
Which is as nonsensical as many religious claims, so why not?
But the irony here is, as you don't see it, but I'm looking at a picture of
Elvis.
We have
on
a
the
cutout of
surfboard.
Elvis.
We do. We have a cutout of Elvis in our studio.
That's going to be hard to explain.
We should probably take a picture of it.
We should. You should take a picture of it and post it up on
I'll put it on
posty
social
thing.
media. I'll get it, Adam. Don't
Okay.
bother with your blurry.
Because I'll mess it up.
I've seen your Instagram posts. Let's just say that. Okay, so there's these ludicrous things, right? Like somebody saying, "I had dinner with Elvis." You're likely not going to spend the time to
Nor do I
investigate that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we put it into perspective for someone that the claims of Christianity are important enough or even relevant enough or not ludicrous enough to bother investigating at all? And so I think, like I said, these two are sort of related. One comes from a more actually proper religious question about sin, doctrinal, theological question about sin. The other one comes from sort of a philosophical or reasoned reason about why you don't need.
Those are huge questions, very important questions too, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the we've had lots of great questions, but these are really good questions. So, but I think your dad should probably take on the first one.
Well, somebody that thinks, the starting point is talking to somebody about their problem as a sinner has really they get it. Right, they get that when you're talking to people from the outside and you're sharing the gospel with them, the question is going to come up, or the implication is going to be that they are a sinner in need of a savior, and Christ is that savior, right? And that they need to cling to him as their only hope for salvation.
I also think that's one of the scary things to people about doing evangelism or apologetics, because there's a particular caricature of Christians as sort of the "you are damned" people, right?
Yeah, well, maybe a better way to approach that is, apart from Christ, we are damned.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, you're not pointing the finger at this person. You're not describing them as anything other than you would describe yourself apart from Christ.
Yeah, so there's a danger in saying the reason I'm a believer and the reason you're not is because of some defect that exists in you that doesn't exist in me.
No, I mean, the conversation is this: we are all sinful and unclean. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. We all need and have really only one hope, and that is to cling to Christ alone as our only hope for salvation, period. Now, the thing is that this person is concerned that because our age seems to be so permissive, that and rightly so, it does seem like, especially I'd say sexually, it seems like anything goes, right? And that you cannot point your finger at anybody for doing whatever sort of hedonistic thing they're doing in the moment. But
that's their preference or whatever.
Think of what I just said. The perception is that you cannot point your finger at anybody else for doing whatever hedonistic thing in the moment. Right there, you've identified what is recognized as a current cultural sin, judging somebody else.
And it comes with a bunch of guilt.
And it comes with a bunch of guilt. We live, by all accounts, in the culture of the greatest outrage of almost any time in human history, where people are just awesomely outraged about everyone else's sin. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't have to be happen to be the same sins that we would have all been outraged about 50 years ago.
And it's not always, at least culturally, like the exact words of the Decalogue.
Right. So we're in an age where it is, I think it's actually very easy to convince people that sin is a real problem, that sin in the lives of people is a real problem, that the corruption of sin in this world is a real problem. And probably if you have enough of a conversation that sin in one's own life is a real problem, and that they do feel guilt over what they've done, what they haven't done.
Yeah, I mean,
that they've fallen short in some way, shape, or form. That they're now it might come to fruition the fact that they're not recycling enough or something like that. I don't know, but there's going to be guilt. There's guilt there somewhere. The fact now to take this sort of, I don't mean to sort of argue only internally, but we know this to be the case because the scriptures certainly tell us that the weight of the law is on everybody's heart, and that they're aware, that we're aware of our sins, and that our sins crush us, and that the law is that thing that is used to crush us. And so the thing I disagree with is that in this age, nothing's a sin. In this age, almost everything's a sin, to be honest with you. If I drink in California, if I drink from a plastic straw, I'm a sinner.
Yeah.
Right? Now, maybe I'm not a sinner if I go get stoned and have some sort of weird illicit sex with somebody who's not my wife. Maybe the culture's not going to tell me that's a sin.
It probably won't in California.
Right. Yeah. And whereas I would say that certainly is a sin. But there are other things I do every day that this culture will tell me.
Well, you own a diesel truck.
I own a diesel truck with a giant engine. That's a sin in California. I should be driving an electric vehicle for Pete's sake.
Yeah,
and I'm not.
With a Elizabeth Warren 2020 sticker on it,
or something to that effect.
Yeah.
No, I think the last time we did this, so we did that. We did an episode where we talked about climate change as a religion. And we tried to be careful with this, right? Because that was the closest to a political episode we've done. And we tend to try to avoid that as a direct thing, right? Like, we don't do political punditry on this show.
As much as we want to.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott and I, for our listeners, we talk about doing this a lot, but Caleb reins us in.
I do.
Not a good idea.
I use my production powers. And,
I mean, we could even say it, and we wouldn't know if it... He just wouldn't put it up.
Right. So, I'd cut it out. So that's the thing about it. So we did this, and what was interesting to me about that episode is we got a couple messages that were like, "How dare you, validate the idea that these things are truly sinful? We shouldn't capitulate to what the culture calls sin, and then allow." The real law to be ignored, the law of God to be ignored. And then we also got, on the other hand, literally the opposite. How come you didn't tell people, give them the instructions of what to do to stop destroying the planet? How come you didn't tell them how to live lawfully?
Here's my point.
Yeah.
We live in a culture of outrage. If you're trying to be an evangelist and apologist, don't go around thinking that you can't call people out on sin, because it's literally a hallmark of our current culture.
Yeah.
You can't make it through an award show. I mean, literally at whatever, the Emmys or whatever, this British actor got up, or comedian got up, and told everybody not to make stupid speeches.
Oh, Ricky Gervais.
Yeah, where they're sort of bemoaning everyone else's sin and showing how virtuous they are. Okay, if you're showing how virtuous you are, you're acknowledging that there's virtuous and not virtuous. You're acknowledging that there's righteous and sinner, right?
Yeah.
And then they couldn't help it anyway.
Nope,
they all got up and gave their sermons regarding how sinful the rest of the world is. I mean, don't give in to it. Everybody knows the world is sinful and unclean. Everybody walks around with that guilt. Everybody knows that this world is in need of redemption.
Yep. And I think the idea is that when you're doing this, when you're presenting this to somebody, that they need to make a total account right now, right? So that, like, for instance, somebody's guilt about, say, they're assisting in the destruction of creation, is the way I'll phrase it, in any capacity. Like, that you also need to get them to recognize here and right now their sexual sins and their sins against their family.
Well, let me start there for a second, because you said that they don't match the Decalogue. I don't know. They maybe do or they maybe don't. I think when people make comments like that, they're really sort of mourning the loss of Christendom, right? And especially sort of the temporal things, like a lot of the sexual, sort of morality that came with Christendom as we perceived it. But that's still there in a way. Like, if you take Luther's explanation of do not commit adultery, and you sort of land on the fact that people, male and female, should treat one another with love and respect.
Yeah.
Right. That at the end of the day, this is what he's saying. Like,
He calls it a
don't
service.
don't have sexual relations with someone that's not your husband. Don't have sexual relations with not your wife. But the why to that comes out to be because God created you to love one another.
Yep. That you love and honor your spouse.
That you love and honor one another. Now that is one of the big things in our culture, that there's a side of this sexual revolution that has led to a complete dishonoring of women. And that this is manifest in sexual assault, as this is manifest in
the Super Bowl halftime show.
And manifest in men having power over women in the workplace and forcing them to do things that they don't want to do. That is a sin against God's commandment regarding adultery, and
one the culture is recognizing.
Widely recognized by culture.
Yeah. No, I agree too. And there's some of it opens up even the complexities of this idea that like you can't be a sexual sinner if you're in a monogamous, faithful, quote unquote, married sexual relationship, right?
Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah, of course you can. Husbands and wives abuse each other in those relationships all the time without involving some sort of third party or something like that. Yeah. So, you know, that there's a complexity to these things, and it, you know, I feel you. You know, like it's easy to really get caught up in the loss of these things.
To take Adam's example, you look at what goes on in the Super Bowl halftime show, and you think, I'm living in Sodom and Gomorrah, man. Like this is, and two, it's a weird sort of juxtaposition where you have all this respect women, and then you have this like hyper,
it's bizarre. I mean,
hyper sexuality put on display in the middle of a sporting event, and it's just. I'll acknowledge it's a little hard to wrap your head around. Like it really is, but at the same time, I think the fact that it's been such a topic shows that we haven't completely abandoned, you know, all sense of sexual morality altogether.
So, did you watch the Super Bowl?
You know, we were up. Boy, this is going to sound like we drink all the time. I'm like, we're having whiskey in the backyard the other night. Caleb and I were up at the bar at the Mexican restaurant on the corner when the halftime show came on.
Yeah, it just sort of, it was cool because that place was pretty chill, and the rest of the places were very loud, so we sort of like dodged over.
The funny thing is, I watched the Super Bowl, but in the halftime, I had to drive my son somewhere to meet his friends, and so funny. I missed it. But then I saw all the screenshots, and
it was explicit.
Yeah.
And just to be honest, I've thought Super Bowl halftime shows have been ridiculous for a long time, right? Like people were talking about
I want
like
Weird
how
Al Yankovic to do one.
How it was unfair that say like Adam Levine ripping his shirt off last year didn't get the same criticism and stuff. Well, I think that's ridiculous too.
Yeah.
Like don't get me wrong. Like half naked sweaty dancers at a football game just. Yeah.
I don't know, but at the same time, I will say it was to me. Everything involved with that seemed like it went on forever. Halftime show was a little bit more than a dude ripping his shirt off.
Yeah. What? Yeah.
Well, so I mean, so obviously there is. This is part of the social consciousness, right? And so you can talk about guilt. I think part of this too in these conversations is. You know, you brought this up at the very beginning of this question, is sort of the acknowledging that you are part of the problem as well.
Let me say, the fact that somebody will get mad at me, probably, who hears me say that what went on Sunday was more than a dude ripping his shirt off. Somebody that gets mad at me for that is proof that there is a sense of objective right and wrong out there still.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
that's Paul, Romans 1-2.
Yes, this is my whole point. Like, no matter what I say, the fact that I'm a sinner is going to become obvious to somebody. No matter what I see out there, the fact that sin is out in the world is obvious to me. Mm-hmm. Like it's not gone, guys. It's just...
we call it something different, though.
We
don't use the word sin.
We call it outrage and justice and hashtag.
Yeah, I mean, this was the point on the environmental topic, too, is that, like, there there's an acknowledgement that the world is. I think the name of that episode is "The World Is Ending Again," is
Yeah.
what we said. There's an acknowledgement that
remember
the
that.
world is ending, right? Like that things are not right, and that something's going to have to intervene, all right? And the message of Christianity, I think, the harshness against the world and where it is standing against the world is that the intervention has occurred, and it is now being delivered personally to you, rather than that the intervention needs to be something mustered up by humanity, or
Right.
directed by governments, doing whatever.
And only secular.
Yeah, and only secular. That's a new thing. But Christians have been facing since day one an alternative to the salvation of the world, and we're just in a new era of this alternative.
Which I think is the error in the second question. The second question is more about religion, right? And I think I'd agree with whoever wrote that question that most religion is, frankly, the same. Frankly, makes about the same nonsensical claims, and is frankly mostly about just sheer morality of some stripe or another, and not what Christianity is.
Yeah, so that's the question: is Christianity, are the claims or what we would present to somebody more sensible than "I had dinner with Elvis 2 nights ago"? Right? Is it less ludicrous than that in its proposition?
Well, we've had a number of episodes on this. One fairly recent, I think I remember, where we talked about nonsensical or analytically meaningless claims.
Right.
If a claim is, in principle, not verifiable in any way, shape, or form,
Not even
Move on.
Not even theoretically.
move on.
Move on.
It's the last line. We've mentioned the name before on the show. Wittgenstein, his Tractatus. I'm sure all our readers have gone and bought the German on the left hand side of the page and the English translation on the edition. But the last sentence or the last proposition of that is, "What you cannot speak of, pass over in silence."
That's right.
If you're dealing with something that does not, if there's no way to know to determine the truth of it, it's not worth looking at.
Yeah, I say that when I'm teaching theology classes all the time. What you cannot speak of authoritatively from the text, move on in silence.
Yeah.
You don't. You have no business really standing in front of a group of people and sort of conjuring up ideas out of thin air that you think might be in line with what you think the scriptures might say on something. You teach what they say on a particular issue.
Yeah, that's the whole point of that's what it means to be a confessional, if you will. Repeating what God has already told you.
Yeah.
Done.
And part of this question was about the implications of various religions, right? And I think it lumped all of them together, saying the implications were essentially the same, that you'll either have an afterlife or you won't, or some, you'll either be saved or be damned, some equivalent of that, right? And so, but I actually think with Christianity, it's actually more severe than that.
Well, so let me give his Elvis example, since we have Elvis in the room with us. A more apt example to, I'd say, every other religion on the planet other than Christianity regarding Elvis was, I sat down and had lunch with Elvis in a restaurant, but he only appeared to me and no one else could see him. I had to order for him because the waitress couldn't hear him or see him. And there's no way to verify that it happened, but it happened. I know it happened because I had a conversation with him. That is every other religion on the planet that's got sort of a holy book, right? The holy book is revealed to the person by someone that no one else has ever met, and the events in it are not verifiable except to the person, period. And if that...
It's somebody with special knowledge
Somebody with special knowledge sharing it.
Gnosticism.
A better example is Christianity, just as far as how the facts are laid out. I had lunch with Elvis at the restaurant on the corner on February 6th. It was 11:15. There were approximately 60 people in the room.
The waitress's name was Cheryl.
The waitress's name was Cheryl. I took out a piece of paper and a pencil, and they all wrote down their names and the fact that they saw me with Elvis. He looked a little old and bloated, but they were sure it was Elvis. Right? Now, to say that people aren't interested in that alone because Elvis was such a sort of monumental figure in our past is ridiculous. There's freaking TV shows on it all the time. People are obviously interested in it. But I get what he's saying, that this is not of interest to him because it doesn't have direct implications to his life, whether Elvis is alive or not, or had lunch with me or not. I guess unless that he handed me like his lost album or something like that. But it's not the same thing when we're talking about Christ. You know, we're talking, as we said in the last episode, we're talking about a person who said they were God, who said they had teachings to give us from God, and they were going to prove they were God through a couple things. We normally say performing miracles in view of other people, fulfilling prophecy in view of other people, dying and rising himself again on the third day, and showing himself to be alive and staying alive, right? And then what he says about us and for us holds some merit. If he's claiming that I am the creator of heaven and earth, and I'm going to show you this by conquering the one thing that none of you can conquer, and then I'm going to help you conquer that thing, that's meaningful, and somebody's going to want to know that as much, hopefully more, than whether or not I actually had lunch with Elvis and he handed me his last album.
So communicating, I mean, in that sense, communicating why it matters, not just that it happened. I mean, we keep coming back to this. That's, I would say this non-mechanical portion of apologetics. Really, the evangelism part of this is learning how to clearly communicate the gospel in a not robotic or even not systematic way, right? But in a personal, human, proclamation-oriented way.
Maybe even existential way, we might describe it that way. I remember Rod describing existentialism when he talked about Albert Camus and the old French existentialists after Kierkegaard's day and age. And one of their propositions was something like, a couple other propositions was, you're going to die and you're going to die alone. Maybe that was Ken Samples. I can't remember who it was, but
that sounds like Ken Samples.
But that's sort of, I mean, I feel it myself. I mean, I'm not even close. I don't think I'm close to the age where I have to worry about dying, but I think, wow, there's going to be a day where my kids are going to be without me.
Yeah. Or I think of that all the time.
I think about that. I'm 24.
Yeah. My parents are, I'm not going to say their age on the air, but they're certainly not old, but they're at the place where now all of a sudden physical health and these sorts of things are a factor in terms of where they live and so on. And I sense that they're thinking about, wow, these are the last 30 years or 20 years or whatever of their life. And that eventually that weighs on somebody.
That's right.
Sometimes it's young people. It's the 19-year-old going off to deployment, signing his last will and testament while everybody else is enjoying frappuccinos at college.
Oofta.
Or the 70, 80-year-old going to the nursing home. And that is the telos of everybody.
What's that 1917 movie? Just
Yeah.
millions of 17 to 19-year-olds
Yeah.
thrown in front of cannons and machine guns.
I mean, was I twitching?
You were shaky, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
That's why I drank.
awful.
Yeah.
But that's
Anytime you invite Adam
the
to a war
reality.
movie, you offer to drive.
Yes.
That's the reality for like 90%. Well, let's just say 75% of people over the course of 6,000 years of recorded human history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life is nasty, brutish, and short.
Yep.
Yeah, and Christ is really the only good news, existentially, we might say, in that.
Yeah.
Actually, that's actually...
Muhammad died.
Yep.
All the other, I think the I don't know if he's a prophet or whatever of the Sikh religion. Maybe he went off to eternity. But then there's these reincarnations in the Eastern religions. But the only one who, as you said it, Scott, and may I say so eloquently,
thank you.
And I mean that actually, the only one who actually gives anything meaningful to talk about is Jesus.
Also, the only one that says, "As I have, so I shall for you."
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Not just me, right? And then offers this path to be like.
I mean, the whole reason stated for the resurrection is that you might see that he is risen so that you might know that you will be risen too.
Yeah, his resurrection, in fact, wasn't for him. It wasn't his spiritual enlightenment or
Right.
fulfillment.
Yeah.
It was for us.
Yeah.
I actually think that's why 1517 has been able to marry the importance of that in like from like traditions like Ferde and Nestigan and Paulson and the apologetic tradition handed down by Montgomery and Rod, because when you're doing these things, they go hand in hand. That necessity of proclaiming that comfort and the for you of the gospel is essential to actually doing the apologetic task in a non-mechanical way.
Yeah.
It's sort of that unique space I think we've managed to carve out.
Yeah. A couple hours ago, I was changing the brake pads on a friend of mine who happens to be Muslim, and he's got a friend who's much more. Have we talked about the guy who wants to cut off my head?
Yeah.
On the show. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, not on the show.
Not on the show.
We've talked about
And
it.
so I'm doing whatever. Oh, it's mostly for me or therapy, getting greasy. I feel like I've accomplished something because I don't accomplish much in life. But these guys watching me change brake pads and asking me questions about Christianity. And we gain no ground. I gain no ground in our
That you know of.
conversations that I know of. We're just talking. But every once in a while, those questions come up. Like, this is months ago when one of them said, why is it that churches put on their stained glass an image of a man hanging from a cross? And those are golden opportunities.
That really is,
Not
isn't
for
it?
apologetics as we might define them theoretically, but as you put it, the more practical side. Well, let me tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, those things happen some would call them, I think they...
Well, you're not going to look at him and say, let me give you 6 facts about the resurrection.
No. You say, well, this is
Just like I tell my people in apologetics classes.
Yeah. We put it up there because this is the center point of all of God's revelation in time and space, where his son took on human flesh. 30 days later after being born, or give or take, dies on a cross
30 years.
for our sins. What did I say? 30 days?
You
Sorry,
said
30
days.
years.
It's like, whoa.
Dies on a cross. 3 days later, rises for our justification.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And not just for you and me, but for the sins of the whole world. I mean, that's huge. It's a cosmic.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up in sort of like today. This happens in the midst of something sort of just neighborly, right? Like helping somebody do a mechanical task that they couldn't do on their own.
Yeah.
And I also like this. This comes back to our proximity issue as well. That wasn't, part of this like door-to-door evangelism, which I'm not totally opposed to, but I also think is some of this like obligation that runs in the back of people's head. That's somebody who you do things with like on the regular, multiple times a week, right? It's somebody you've grown a relationship with. It's sort of this circle of people. It's not in your family, but it's that next circle out. Somebody that you interact with on the regular. So of course these conversations can actually develop a little more meaning and substance to them.
Yeah.
And I think that would be my encouragement to people too who are like looking for an opportunity to evangelize. I think they'll sort of come to you as you serve your neighbor in the world.
That's the whole idea of vocation. Go and do what God has called you to do.
I actually think that's the whole idea of, this could be another episode, but of good works, generally speaking, right, is not that they earn you anything for your salvation, not that you can look at them to understand that you're more holy, but that in serving your neighbor in good works, you are actually given an opportunity or open somebody to the gospel.
Heck yeah.
When you are a good father, it's beneficial to your children in the world, and there's lots of reasons to do it, but it also gives you opportunity for your children not to just hate their faith because they hate you and you were associated with that and all these sorts of other things. There's actually a very gospel-oriented end
To parenting?
of being a good neighbor, right? Of loving and serving your neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's one of those things where when good works get detached from that, when they get detached from service of neighbor outside of you and they're sort of just about holy things between you and God, you lose sight of that, like these true good works are this opportunity to proclaim.
Yeah. And it may take 20 years
Yeah, that's right.
or 20 minutes.
Yep.
You
And
never know.
You just don't know.
Yeah.
Well, cool, guys.
God gives you gifts Use them to benefit your neighbor.
Yep.
I thought we were antinomians.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
So I told you before the show, I really am fond of this guy Edmund Burke.
Yeah.
Late 18th century. One of the things I like about him is how much he despises abstractions, metaphysical speculation. And those who would accuse us of being antinomian, I've never been accused of that to my face. I know you have probably. And
Well, not to my face.
to
my Facebook.
yeah, they've done it all in abstraction.
Yeah.
They can go. The nicest way I can say it is pack sand.
Pound sand.
Pound sand, sorry.
Yeah, that's too funny. Well, interesting. So
We're going to get some responses.
we probably will, but I mean,
Or he'll edit that part out. We never know.
yeah.
On that note,
well, on that note, hey, I appreciate the questions that we've been getting. Honestly, these have been. This one was fun. The last one was fun. It's given sort of new opportunity, new life to these apologetic episodes, which is great. I think we'll maybe do one more to round these out before we start sprinkling in some other episodes again. Here at the Thank You Fellows, we sort of strike while the iron's hot. So if somebody has a good idea or a good episode comes up, we do it. When David Anderson was here, we actually recorded an episode about happiness that'll be coming out in a little while. So that's actually, that'll be posted out of its recording order, but towards the end of this series or after this series on happiness. That's a fun one that's coming out. I think we're going to have an episode here in the near future on a Christian's vocation as citizen in the world. I think that one's an interesting topic that we've all been reflecting on. I think we did a little reflection about that on this episode even. So we'll have interesting topics abounding, but I want to throw this out there. I had asked for apologetic questions and we got some great ones. I will ask do you have questions about a topic, a theological topic, a topic in society and culture? I know that, we don't always do those, but if you send us a question, we might be able to navigate it into an episode. And I get questions all the time. Every week we get sort of listener questions as they come to them, but I'm asking in this specific way and format in that not just a question to us, but a question that you think might make a good episode for us. Because some questions are of a more personal nature, right? And we usually respond over email. And those are great. But I'm asking listeners to think specifically of something you want to hear on air you think could make a good episode for us to put into the consideration pile. I want to do some more of the biographical episodes we did. We brought up the C.S. Lewis and Augustine today, and as it came to iTunes ratings, I think it'd be a good idea to do an episode on Tolkien. We haven't done one of those, so add some of those figures that we've skipped over in there and the like. So, hey, thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for rating the show. Thank you for supporting us with your financial donations and everything else. And we'll catch you next time. Bye.